Yeah, I'm Daniel. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Been working as an entrepreneur for many years. Got into fintech about a year ago, and me and Agam have been going down this path of exploring like different founders and entrepreneurs and executives who are uh, experts in the fintech field, in the AI field, also just building companies. So yeah, and Agam, maybe you could give an intro of yourself.
Oh, oh, yeah. Hey, Sarah, and hey, Christina. Nice to connect with you today. So, a little bit about myself. I graduated with Masters in Tech Management from New York University. So, I've been there in New York since last 3 years. Currently, I am visiting my parents in India. So, I'm connecting from there. A little bit about my background. After my master's, I started working with multiple startups, one in WhatsApp commerce and one in payments industries. So that's how I got into fintech. As I was exploring opportunities in fintech, I bumped up with Daniel on LinkedIn, and we kind of connected on this term that, it's great to interview with people, get their stories, and if we can just have a podcast episode that we can share with everyone, it will be great. And that's how we connected. And now we are working for like and as a podcaster, like we both are a host for this podcast, and we do at least 5 episodes a month, and we invite early stage startup founders. And it has been great so far. We are already down 15 episodes almost, and it's great
Nice.
to have you today.
Awesome. So I guess just to kick things off with you guys, maybe you could give us a little of the story of Cube and, what is Cube and like why would you even work on that? Because there's so many different projects in the world to work on and, what made you lead down this path of like doing this particular startup?
Great question. So Cube and everything that Cube is about is my life's work. My favorite toy as a child was a cash register, which was the beginning of where my career would take me. And after I graduated from university, I wanted to understand how businesses worked a bit better. And so I thought, what better way to understand how businesses work than to understand the language of business, which is, of course, the numbers or the financials. And those who speak the language have something incredibly powerful in their back pocket, and that they can take numbers and turn it into narrative. So the area of fintech that we're in is called financial planning and analysis, and it's within the office of the CFO, and it is an incredibly underserved, overlooked function for a very long time. It is not niche at all. Any company over a certain size is going to have a full-time FP&A person or team, but it was sort of lumped in with accounting and treasury and all these other functions within the office of the CFO, I think in many ways because not everyone understood the office of the CFO very well. So I went into my own finance career. I worked for a couple big companies, GE back when they were in their heyday, Deloitte Consulting doing implementations of a lot of the solutions that we're building today. And then I became a startup CFO and got lucky quite a few times. So my first startup was this little 30-person company called Rent the Runway, which now, of course, is a public company. After leaving Rent the Runway, I went to another little 50-person company in North America called Criteo, which ended up IPOing in 2013. And then did it one more time and wasn't quite the same outcome, but it was the time I decided to do my first implementation of FP&A software. And as you can imagine, it went as bad as any implementation that would push someone to start their own company around it. So we bought a leading platform in the market. We thought it was going to take 4 to 6 weeks to get live. And 6 months later, we were still trying to get it up and running. Finally, we get it going. And my whole team basically rejected it. They started to build their own models in Excel in the background. The people around the company didn't want to use it, and everyone really went back to spreadsheets. And so in the world of FP&A, you really have two options. And again, FP&A, just for the audience, is financial planning and analysis. But what it is in a nutshell is you're telling a story with numbers of the past, what happened. You're telling a story of the future. What do you plan to happen? What might happen? And you're telling a story of the present. what did we say was going to happen and what did happen and where are we off? That's performance management. Sounds very simple, very difficult to do because most teams don't have any tools. 90% of companies still use Microsoft Excel, sometimes little Google Sheets to do all of this financial planning, making billions and trillions of dollars worth of decisions based on a completely manual platform. So the problem today in the world of FP&A is you have two bad options, really. You can stick with spreadsheets, or you can rip and replace and use FP&A software, which is typically web-based, but it requires an entirely new way of doing FP&A. And the average finance person who's worked in this field for a certain period of time speaks the language. They speak finance, but they also speak Excel and they speak spreadsheets. They've learned how to model and build forecasts within a spreadsheet. So you're basically asking people who want to continue to do their jobs to change everything about how they've done their jobs. So starting Cube was really about creating a new option. Sort of like when Uber came to market, there was you could buy a car, you could rent a car, and suddenly there was rideshare. Suddenly we have spreadsheet native FP&A. And the concept behind Cube is very simple, very difficult to execute, but very simple, which is we took all the great learnings of FP&A software and we paired it with the ease of use of everyone's favorite front end, which is Microsoft Excel. So we built the platform from the bottom up to be spreadsheet enabled so that you could have your cake and eat it too. And we launched in 2019 and we've been growing ever since.
It's a really unique time actually for this type of software just because of everything that's happening. And, I see all these people running around saying things like become profitable, try not to have a high burn rate. All of the layoffs that are happening in like, around the United States. Is there a world where a lot of, I would say, people become way more aware of what's like happening in their companies? I think there's a lot of miseducation actually. And you touched upon this, like there's a toolkit that's out there and CFOs have this toolkit and finance people have this toolkit. Like entrepreneurs kind of just go into it, their eyes are, wide-eyed and they're excited about their startup and then they kind of jump into this world, but they don't have that education. Does the software allow for that for the entrepreneur to like understand like what's happening way more in their company? And it sounds like you rely heavily on the Excel side, so it's pulling things into Excel. Is that correct? Is that the
Yes.
right way to think about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason that's important is because FP&A is not just about reporting the past. You can report easily in a web format using data visuals and things like that, which Cube has. But what's really critically important about this is when you're building a plan for the future, it's like they say in Dirty Dancing, no one puts baby in a corner. You can't put your data in a very restricted, constrained format and expect you to be able to build for the unique way you're planning to build your business because you're starting from scratch. It's like paper. And that's why using a format like Excel is incredibly important in the planning process.
I see. So you guys picked Excel, and I think for a lot of people out there that are listening, Excel is like the de facto, I guess, for this type of world of FP&A. People kind of just build models in Excel. Why is that? What is it about Excel? I guess it's so mendable, or is it like what made you guys pick that as your route? A lot of entrepreneurs would be, building their own spreadsheet software. You guys opted not to do that.
Yes, and this is why it took so long for a concept like ours to come to market, because if you were just looking at it outside in, you would imagine that Excel is the problem. People complain about spreadsheets. They're not databases. They have limited collaboration functionality. They can't manage your data well. They stall out. There's all these issues with spreadsheets. But what's missing from that when people complain about them is they are the lingua franca of data in many ways. So if you think about it, any structured data you've ever seen comes either in columns, so a database table, or a row column format, so a matrix. And a spreadsheet is really just that. It's rows and columns that data can be ingested into. And those that love spreadsheets end up making pivot tables. So you could take multiple data tables, match them together, and start slicing and dicing data. It is foundational to data, not even to FP&A. And an FP&A person, their role is fundamentally to take all of the data that comes out of the business, finance is the most downstream function. That means everything that touches sales, HR, accounting, you name it, somehow ends up in finance's hands before those numbers get reported to the CEO, founder, to the board, to Wall Street, to whomever. And so they need the most flexible data format because they're getting their data that they're ingesting in all different ways, shapes, and forms. And they're often getting that data in not the cleanest format. So because finance is ultimately responsible for the way that data is going to show up, they're also responsible for cleansing it. And where do you cleanse data when something looks funky in Salesforce? You download it to a spreadsheet, you make some changes, and that's now your source of truth. We're able to do that, but we create structure around it by allowing you to take that spreadsheet that you just edited and push that data into Cube, into the cloud, and lives in our backend.
I see. So you guys have two parts. It's one is Excel, and then it syncs with like your backend software. Between the two of those, you can is the front end going to always be Excel, or is the front end going to be the Cube software?
It could be different things. Let me describe a little bit about how
Sure.
the platform works. So first off, we are a platform that has multiple access points. So just like any great software out there, we have a backend and a database where all of your information and data is structured and stored in the cloud. On top of that, you've got all of the controls and permissioning of making sure people don't see the wrong things, that they have the right level of access control, that there are levels of governance and audit trails built into the data itself. So that's just the data that lives out in the ether. Then how do you get that data into Cube? The first thing is you're going to pull in data from your source system. So we have a universal connector that typically pulls in from your general ledger, your CRM, your HRIS platforms, and unifies that data into one single source of truth. The reality is no data that comes in is ever perfect. So if you were to take that data, get it into Cube, find issues with the way it was captured, you could throw it into a spreadsheet, edit it, and push it back. So now you have this beautiful single source of clean data. Now it's time for analysis. Where do I want to do my analysis? Well, I pull the same report every single week. I'm going to throw it into Cube Analytics. So we have our own analytics portion of the platform where you can look at your dashboards every week. But now it's time to plan. I want to look at what next quarter, I want to start thinking a little bit more about next quarter. I'm going to pull together some data and layer it with some assumptions. I need to do that in a blank sheet of paper, basically. So that's going to be my spreadsheet. So I go to Excel where we have a plugin. And if you think about it, it's like a two-way pivot table in the cloud. So I can type in any sort of dimensionality, and pull that data directly from Cube into my spreadsheet so that I can just create analysis on the fly. It's basically like having a library of data at your fingertips without having to go look things up in a card catalog. Very old analogy, but we're disrupting something very old.
Got it. Got it. Now, I guess the world of like finance, what I find is that they're very careful about what software that they pick, right? And you guys are a new startup. I think there's a lot of, fintech is bubbling. I think there's a lot of activity in fintech. But what makes them pick a Cube over? It sounds like you had horrible experiences with like other vendors.
Correct.
I'm assuming they're very big, very complex software that you guys would pick in the past, and it took all this time to implement it, and it didn't even work. And that's why you created Cube. But like, how does change happen and this is the question for all startups, right? How does change happen for like a Cube? Like, what makes people go, oh, this is what I need? Is it the simplicity? But maybe you could talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, this is really classic crossing the chasm. So to your point, especially in finance, there's going to be more risk aversion to trying something new. What we were very, very cautious of in the early days of Cube was not building software that early adopters wanted, which sounds completely contrary to what you should do. There are lots of people who wanted to see Cube look like a flying car and to be completely out of spreadsheets and use AI and crazy stuff to help me get my answers faster if I want to ask a question like how many sales reps do I hire next quarter? That's a great idea, but you have to really understand what problem you're solving. So we were super, super hyper focused on who is our persona, who is our core customer. Unfortunately, it was not founders and CEOs, it was the finance function. And within the finance function, it wasn't necessarily the treasurer, it was the FP&A person. And within the role of FP&A, what was the specific thing that was causing them the most pain that they just couldn't solve? And that was the performance management piece of I need to tie what I said I would do with what I've actually done, and I need answers quickly. So we set out to solve that one problem. Again, sounds very simple, but very complex. And we did it in the simplest way possible. And the way we did it in the simplest way possible was by not changing existing workflows and existing software for the primary user. So while you add Cube to your workflows, you're not taking spreadsheets away. So we're not replacing Excel, and we're not making you stay with no difference. We're basically augmenting the existing work that you already have. We're not making you rebuild your financial models. We're augmenting what you have. And the beauty of this method means someone can start on Cube and stay 80% spreadsheet, 20% Cube for the first 3 to 6 months while they get used to using FP&A software. And our best customers are 90% Cube, 10% spreadsheet, because they've learned to go deeper into the platform on this spectrum of flexibility versus control. Excel is all flexibility, little control. Cube is, a back-end system in theory with all the audit trails and controls is 100% control. So you can go any which way on the spectrum as you'd like. And that's the way we found our early adopters would be ones who are much less traditional early adopters.
Got it. So you really verticalized and you went straight for a specific individual in the company, which was the FP&A person or team.
Correct.
And that makes them feel special in a way, because I don't know of a lot of software that's just for FP&A people. So maybe that alone is that gets people excited and they're like, this is for me. I'm the FP&A person in the company. I need to try this. So it creates a pressure point internally in a company. Interesting. Agam, do you have questions? I've been taking a lot of time.
Sure, yeah. Christina, that's really great, and the way you put up the whole platform, it just gives me a visualization like how it's gonna look like. I'm gonna just go and see a demo video after this. So thank you so much for that. I have a quick question regarding how's the customer journey look like? Like when a person just decides to get onboarded on the Cube platform and from the old spreadsheet models, what they are using, how they're going to transition into the Cube platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is one of the reasons why people choose us is our simplicity and ease of use. It makes it easy to transition. So step one, once you've decided to work with us and we kick off the onboarding journey, is we can get customers live in as little as 2 weeks. Again, it depends on the scope of what you're trying to execute, but the beauty again is you don't have to rebuild your existing models. We convert them because you're staying in the spreadsheet and we're adding them to a cloud-based model. So once you get connected with our implementation team, we'll get your access to your source systems. We'll set up all the connectors so all the pieces work. We tie out all of your data to make sure things are working. And then we get you up and running typically with an actuals versus budget. And we put you through a Cube training. Very, very simple. Just, people work best, or at least I find I work best, just starting to use the damn thing. So for example, if you're not one for reading instructions, this is definitely the type of software for you. It's very intuitive. And so we get people using the platform as quickly as possible. So that's the beginning of the user journey. And then of course, throughout that, we have training. We have a lot of digital customer success things that we have. So within the first month, you're getting regular emails from us, training videos, and you have a dedicated customer success rep who's there to make sure that you have great adoption, not just for yourself if you're an FP&A, but if you're adding the rest of your team or you have turnover, change in your team, you want to add a new member, making sure that they're successful.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So I was just assuming that, when you said that 90% of your top adopters are 90% Cube platform and 10% spreadsheets. So they must be, extensively trained for using the platform. But also one part goes to the ease of use of the platform and how the you explained about the usability of the platform. So I think that's pretty great. That's one particular point on having a successful platform. But another question is regarding adaptability. Like, the finance people are pretty much robust on the models they already know and the interface they
Mhm.
already are aware of, and making them transition to new one. That's a particular pain point, but Cube solves that by, keeping them aware that, you can just go back to the spreadsheet and use Cube in interaction with it. So does it like give you uh, an upper hand that people can still use their spreadsheet, or is it like you get a bit of uh, like what friction while when you pitch that, okay, you can also do analytics on our Cube platform, making them
Yeah,
transitioning from using the spreadsheet to getting on your platform?
I don't think the friction is in the transition. I think some of the friction is in the market awareness that the spreadsheet is in fact not the problem. Because it's very easy to say, like, I don't know, if something's wrong with the software on your laptop, you think it's your laptop. Well, if you're like my parents or something, you might be like, oh, my computer's broken, but it's the software on the computer, not the hardware. And I think oftentimes Excel or spreadsheets get the blame for the fact that spreadsheets can only do so much. And if you want to have a holistic FP&A finance transformation, there are things that you need on top of spreadsheets, but getting rid of them is actually not the answer. And there's data that's proven this time and time again. The FP&A software space has been around for 20 plus years, maybe 30. This started in the 1980s and 90s with, again, replacing spreadsheets. And data has shown time and time again that when companies replace spreadsheets, they go back to them over 80% of the time. So the people have spoken. It's just a matter of, if you're new to this problem, do you go to the same conclusion that the spreadsheet is the issue, not the fact that you don't have proper data unification, you don't have a control layer, you haven't built out roles and responsibilities alignment. Those are all things that you do in Cube on top of working in your spreadsheets. But if you were to replace the entire thing on its own, you now add a layer of change management and rebuilding of everything you've known, which creates entirely new friction in the process.
Silly question. Also, like, there's Mac numbers, there's Google Sheets, there's other spreadsheet products out there. Like, the world of finance runs on Excel. Like, I maybe it was because of the 80s and the 90s that people picked that as like the de facto way to like manipulate numbers. Like, is there something specific in Excel that like makes it have an edge over the other tools out there? And then that's, because you're using Excel, I mean, that honestly is the de facto. I've seen every NFP&A person. So what you're talking about, like from my experience, is actually true. They all use Excel. And whenever you present something else, they convert it to Excel,
Yes.
right? And then they're using Excel. I'm like, what is it about that? I mean, you picked it. I mean, you picked the right format, and it's almost probably, I would say 100% of FP&A people touch Excel. They pick it, they want to use it. So like you pick the perfect partnership with that product, but like why not numbers or Google Sheets? Are they
Yeah.
just too new? Are they just like brittle? Is there functions missing? Like what is it about Excel that like the finance FP&A teams always run to?
Yeah. And there's always a corny finance joke I use, or at least I used to in the beginning of talking about Cube, is I'd say, let me guess, to the finance person, are you on a PC? And they're like, yes. And I go, let me guess, is everyone else on a Mac? Yes, of course. Because finance people need their PCs because they need Microsoft Excel specifically. By the way, Cube does work on top of other platforms. We work with Google Sheets. We could work
Got it.
with numbers. We
Okay.
built a patent to work on top of, we have a patent on reading data across rows and columns. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but Excel is the most prolific. The reason, or at least the theory as to why Excel will always be around is because Microsoft has done a really good job of having a power user in finance. And if you think about any company you're building, you want to focus on the 20% of power users versus the 80% of everyone else. So, I've heard people who run, if you think about gyms, for example, they're built for the people who go to the gym all the time, even though you pay the same, even though you go like, if you're me, you go like twice a year. Microsoft did a really good job of having features and functionality that cater to more experienced users. It's faster. It definitely does not have the same capabilities around collaboration as, say, a Google Sheets, where they do a much better job at it. But there's a familiarity to it, and it just has greater functionality than you'll see in other areas or other types of software like Numbers or Google Sheets.
Got it. Got it. Do you guys handle like one thing that I've experienced with just Excel is revisions and people might make a change in their local computer. Does the Cube connector know these changes are happening? Like, or is it they have to pass that file around to everyone on their team?
Oh no, think of Excel as like a draft screen. Anything that's in your Excel is only in your Excel. We don't touch that. Once you press publish, it goes from draft state to save state. So once you've published anything, it's now part of Cube. You can erase the whole spreadsheet, but once it's been published, you can recover it. So we also then track every single change that's made. So every publish that you've made, what's the change, what the differential is, and we have an audit trail that will tell you exactly what the difference is. Because you might show up as a finance person, show up to your numbers one morning if you allow other people to publish, which you can also restrict, and say, what the hell happened in this latest budget cycle? And you can go back and track who made what change. And there's oftentimes you can add a memo note, you can see who was it, what time it was. And then there's lots of layers to this too. You can do this in multiple currencies. You can have exchange rates. So all these layers that data typically gets lost in Excel, Cube has the ability to track changes and serve up a better understanding of what might have happened between version A and version B.
Got it. Are there generally, and this is kind of a novice question, how large can an FP&A team be? Is it one person usually? Is it like more than that in public companies? Like, what does a team structure look like?
It's typically smaller and smaller companies. So until you get to be about 1,000 FTEs, you're talking about a dozen at most, typically. As you get into upper mid-market, lower enterprise, they're by business unit. You can definitely get FP&A teams in the hundreds at large companies. But generally, the
Wow.
real folks who have input are not just FP&A. FP&A is like the admin. So if you think about sales ops, is a good analogy. Think about the CRM. How many sales ops people are really in a company? Some. Yes, you'll get bigger teams at larger companies. But the real benefit of something like a Salesforce is you're getting data integrity and managing your entire Salesforce through the platform, even though the owner is sales ops. Similar to Cube and finance. We built for FP&A, like Salesforce built for sales ops in the beginning. But budgets are managed by the entire company. Financial data and operational data is understood and reported on and managed by the entire company. That's where the value really accelerates.
Got it. Got it. And it makes sense that you have like is the publish button something you guys had built into Excel? So you click publish, it goes out there, and then all the FP&A people can kind of be in sync, or is that something that's just default in Excel?
We have an add-in in
Okay.
Excel that connects your Excel to Cube. So it's a connector, and that add-on looks the same whether you're in Excel, you're in Google Sheets, you're somewhere else. And then once the data is in the cloud, we also have a web app that you can log into. It's all of your analytics, your data visuals. You can pull down information. It's where you manage your data structures. What kind of hierarchies do you use? All of that happens within the Cube app itself.
Got it. Got it. Um, okay. So I guess just changing topics a little bit here from what Cube is and, product. Going back to, you mentioned you worked at like Rent the Runway. What made that company successful? And, taking your knowledge from that company and applying it in Cube, like what was it about that experience? You spoke really highly about it. Like, why was that company successful? And what was the secret sauce that made that so, I've heard of the name. I've never used Rent the Runway, but I get there's something about it that was huge demand, and the brand there is huge. Like, so they did something really right. But like your learnings from that, like what did you take away?
I it's a good question. When I started at Rent the Runway, this was 2010. I was coming from Deloitte. I was in New York City. So at the time, going to a startup was not something everyone was doing. And especially you don't leave a steady job at a steady firm like Deloitte to go to a company that no one's heard of before. So it seemed crazy on the surface, but there were a lot of things, a lot of trends that were merging at once that helped usher Rent the Runway into a public offering. The first, of course, was it has an amazing product market fit. Just the idea of women renting clothing for special occasions or just having a way to reuse their wardrobe touches on so many different things, from environmental to just the age of social media, which kicked off around 2010, 2011. If you think about Instagram, you don't want to be photographed in the same outfit every week or every party. This is where Rent the Runaway was particularly successful. They also came in right at the wave of millennials coming of age and having their time out socially. So there was a huge demographic that was growing. No one had tried this or been successful at it before because, there weren't as many female entrepreneurs at the time. So Jen and Jenny founded this company right out of Harvard Business School. They had great investors backing them. There was a venture capital ecosystem that supported a lot of money raised, and that money was needed to figure out the product market fit, and great brand building and execution over a very long period of time. So I don't know the exact saying, but sometimes it's just about not quitting and keeping it going. And they've really been able to continue to push through so many different challenges, including COVID. I was only at the company for under 2 years in the very early days. I wanted to go to a later stage org, but there were a lot of very special things I saw in the early days of Rent the Runway that prompted me to leave a very conservative company like Deloitte and join a startup that was basically in like a back room of a dungeon in New York City.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. So you went from a massive company, which was GE, to Deloitte, which is also a massive company, to this crazy small scrappy startup in New York. New York, is that where they're from? Rent Runway team?
Yes, New York City.
New York. And then you went to, how do you say Credo?
It's Criteo, or we called it
Criteo.
Criteo at the time. Yes.
That one, did you join when they were public or were they going public?
I joined when they were private and
Okay.
was there through the IPO process.
I mean, so that's going from Rent the Runway, which is, scrappy startup, but successful, to like a company that's going public. I mean, going public, I hear it's extremely stressful. I hear that there's a lot of scrutiny around like doing that. Like, what was the success of that company? What made that company successful? Because, you know, you went from one home run to another. Like, you probably were taking a lot of knowledge. Like, was it the culture? Was it product market fit? Was it the team like executing? Like, what was it about that company that made you, and you stayed there about 2 years. Like, what was it
Mhm.
there, the energy there that made you like it and whatnot? A lot of
Uh,
questions.
yes. I'll give you the worst answer, which was it's all of the above. There's so many different things. Also, you'll notice in each of these examples, there's a timing element to it. So Rent the Runway hit these trends exactly at the right time. Criteo, this was the up and comings of ad tech. And at the time, ad tech couldn't have been hotter than like 2013, for example. It hadn't been completely commoditized. Brands were spending a lot directly, and Criteo had great not only product market fit, but could show value and performance for advertisers. There's no better formula than having a product that works, that says you put $1 in, you get $10 out. I mean, that's just a recipe for success. And when I started, it was relatively small in the US, but had taken hold in Europe. And we were probably only a 50-person office in North America. But just like I had done with Rent the Runway, I looked at who are the financial backers, who's on the team, who's running the company, and is this a team where I feel like I can be successful? And so those signs pointed in the right direction. And fortunately, after I started, the growth was astronomical. So I think it was, in the tens of millions to the hundreds of millions in just a couple of years.
Wow. I mean, that sounds stressful, but also great.
I
Um,
love stress. So stress was once you've gone startup and you only know the startup stress life, it would be impossible for me to go back to a big company. Impossible.
so
It's too much fun.
I guess are you saying bigger companies have a different culture? I've actually never worked at a large company like a Deloitte or a GE. I'm assuming things move at like a snail's pace where there's a lot of debate. The startup world, it's like you kind of make decisions on the fly. You're trying to make the best decision for the company, but it happens pretty quickly, like within the latest a month, right? Like you don't sit on things in startups. But I guess I'm assuming a GE, it seems like the large company was not for you. Like you wanted to go towards something that was quick and nimble.
I didn't know what I wanted, but I had been in consulting when I was at Deloitte, and I loved consulting because you're constantly changing what you're doing and you're a change agent and you're making things happen. And I loved that. So going to a startup was a natural transition. I think the reason why bigger companies move slower, it's a broad theory, but it's that execution control scale. When you're a company like Google, making a mistake will is devastating, but going slow is not. You have a cash cow, you don't really need to go as fast. Whereas in a startup, it's a ticking time bomb to running out of money. So you can afford to take more risks. And so that means you can also have much bigger outcomes, but also much bigger failures. Like the likelihood of Google going down for a small mistake is unlikely, but for a startup, that can happen. So you're much more willing to take risks and move faster because you literally have to.
Got it. Got it. Um, cool. Agam, do you have questions?
Yeah, awesome, awesome, Christina. And I think you have a thing about catching up the trend from fast fashion to ed tech. I think you're catching up the trend for FP&A and
Yes.
industry as well in finance. So where do you see like AI coming in, and do you have any plans to incorporate AI in Cube, and in what capacity it could be integrated, like how it can help in FPA?
Yeah. We always we started with thinking about how will AI impact our customer and what is the best way to use this in our product. So I think the obvious answer for most people on the outside looking in is, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a chatbot that's like, how many sales reps can I hire next quarter? Sort of the classic question. The problem with having AI that tells you that answer is finance is a persona, and I know this because I was a CFO, that likes to see how the sausage is made. So black boxes don't work. However, if I were to ask that question and then we were to provide an answer with all of the backup, here's how we got to that calculation. That's where AI could be interesting. But that's like a vitamin, not necessarily a painkiller. So when we go back to like, what are some of the foundational challenges for a persona, for FP&A? It is really around data management still. So even with Cube, you may have things that change with the data that comes into Cube. So let's say you reformat your chart of accounts entirely. So now you have to sort of figure out, how do I get my accounting team decided to rebuild their chart of accounts. How do I now connect that back to Cube? That's an area where we can use AI to look at data and trends across lots of different data sets and suggest to you where you might be mapping this data. So it is a very unsexy type of machine learning that helps to solve some of the most painful challenges within FP&A, which is really around data management and data oversight. So we see that being one of the most interesting areas to go into first. And it's also not an area that, Microsoft Copilot is also building. Like everyone's building an AI chatbot. if they're zigging, I often think it's always better to zag.
Would you say, so you're saying the finance teams like to know every piece of like how you get to an answer. Um,
Yes.
I guess AI is a black box in that sense, but at what point would you think AI in the future would be useful? Is it like at all useful in the finance side, or you think it's always
Oh,
going to be like,
100%. Yeah, there are so many different ways you can use it. And let me back up and talk about the way I think about the world of strategic finance. So FP&A has also been named strategic finance. It's not the accounting, it's not the debits and credits. It's about talking about the story behind the numbers. If you think about a hierarchy of needs, like a pyramid, the top of the pyramid is strategic finance. The bottom of the pyramid is around data management and data integrity and data fidelity. And then as you work your way up the pyramid, it's about reporting, historical data reporting, it's around planning, it's around communication. But until you've solved the data equation, you can never get to the strategic finance. So going back to how AI can help finance leaders ensure data fidelity, that's where they spend 80% of their time. So that's tremendously, tremendously valuable in the future of how we can use AI and machine learning to accelerate some of those data fidelity exercises. As you move up the pyramid, there's all these different ways that you can use AI. And the most obvious one, of course, is using a chat-like format to answer questions. The important thing, though, will be understanding how the AI got to that answer, which is just as important as if finance person themselves got to a certain answer. You kind of want to check the work, make sure they're using the right assumptions and the right methodologies in order to get to that specific answer.
got it, got it.
So yeah. So in summation, it has a very valuable, there's value there. It's just not going to be as obvious as I think meets the eye.
Got it. I mean, I think about like self-driving cars. You always want to know there's scenarios where it kind of just is going to do what it's going to do, and you just need a human in the loop to like really oversee what's happening and understand each piece of like how do you get from point A to point B without crashing. So it sounds like it's very similar in the sense like you need to know everything that's happening in real time, but it can help you in some areas, like stay in a lane, like lane assist.
There's always context that never ended up in a data set, and that's where humans are the most impactful.
Got it. Um, Another question for you, like, will Cube, let's say it's 10 years from now, what does a Cube look like? What is the future of Cube? Like, what do you see? Is honing all FP&A like teams and dominating that market? It sounds like a great place to be because everybody needs it, honestly. Like every company that has FP&A needs like a Cube software. Like, is that the end goal, or do you have a big like another vision for it, or is there another piece of it? Or it's specifically, let's get everybody using this.
Well, our mission as a company is to help every company hit their numbers. So that's our broader mission. And our vision is to help make plans into reality. And that is more than just the finance team. So we're starting with FP&A. So just like any good startup, you want to know who your customer is. You want to solve a real pain point. You want to get from those early adopters to the mainstream. You want to cross the chasm. But longer term, we're more than just about FP&A. FP&A is building all of this reporting and plans for a reason, and it's to hit their numbers. And who cares about hitting their numbers? The entire company. So all organizations, anyone who has a stake in whether it's the budget or building a strategic direction for the company is going to get exponential value out of Cube. So we call this space not FP&A, but XP&A. So that touches marketing, sales, the office of the CEO, you name it, is part of the planning process.
Got it. Got it. That's very, very cool. And congratulations also. Like you guys have raised a large amount of money. So you have a true venture-backed company, which is amazing. Any tips for entrepreneurs like to get to the point where you guys are, where you've hit milestone after milestone? Like, is there advice for the entrepreneurs listening to the podcast on how to be as successful as you guys are?
I always said for entrepreneurs in the early days, I take from not the book, but the movie about getting on base, Moneyball, where you're not trying to hit home runs in the beginning necessarily. You're just trying to get on base. Like, what is the one thing I have to achieve and really celebrate that win? So in the early days of being an entrepreneur, it was a lot of long days and not a lot to show for it. But what I was trying to get to was very, very specific. So in the early days, it was, what is Cube? And then it was, how do I get my first signed contract or my first verbal yeses, then my first signed contract. And then, okay, now we have to deliver. So milestone by milestone, getting across the finish line. It's not always just about raising money. You have to be very strategic in how you do it and what you want to do, because once you've raised as much money as we have, we can only go to the moon. So just know if you want to bootstrap or go for venture capital dollars, you can have that strategy in the back of your mind, but just being ruthlessly focused on what your next milestone is has really helped us get to where we are today.
Got it. Agam, do you have questions?
Yeah, we are closing to the time, almost an hour. So just a closing statement, like if any of our viewers or listeners want to contact you or want to, know more about Cube, how do they reach out to you?
You can check us out at cubesoftware.com. A great website, and send your finance folks over. We know they love Excel. We love it too. We're also friendly with Google Sheets. Check us out.
Awesome. I think honestly that this was a great episode. Thank you guys for doing this with us.